Fernando.
Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to be focusing on Robert's Rules in Action. This is the third session in a series of 5. Today we're going to focus on chairmanship skills. And we're focused on using Robert's Rules of Order to really strike a path to effective meetings, getting more done in less time with clarity. That's the challenge that always faces anytime we're running a meeting. Now let's just start off with a few basics. The presiding officer. And what is the symbol of the presiding officer? It is the gavel. Now, what is the gavel all about? And simply put, it is a way of garnering attention. Having all eyes focused on the presiding officer. That's the purpose of the gavel. You can accomplish the same thing with a glass of water and a spoon tapping against it. It's something about that frequency of sound that pierces all sounds, whether it's music or loud spoken words, bringing all attention of the assembly to the presiding officer. The presiding officer is the traffic cop. Now, I've said this before, and I'm going to reinforce this. I'm going to reinforce it time and time again, because the role of the chair, the presiding officer, is to direct traffic. That's in essence their job. Now, this only works, of course, when there's a partnership in place, and we always spend a little bit of time focusing on the partnership. The partnership is that the presiding officer has a working knowledge of Robert's Rules of Parliamentary Process, and the assembly has a working knowledge of Robert's Rules and Parliamentary Process. If the chair has all knowledge and the assembly none, things do not go well. If the assembly has a lot of knowledge and the presiding officer is inexperienced and has no knowledge, things do not go well. Things only go well when there is a balance between the two. And one way of bridging that balance is through the use of a parliamentarian. Let's just make it clear. The parliamentarian is not the presiding officer. The presiding officer is the one in charge. They're the traffic cop. They're the center of attention. They direct traffic. The parliamentarian is an assistant to the chair to be called upon whenever needed. In some parliamentary systems, the parliamentarian is called a parliamentarian. In other systems, they're called a preceptor. Two different words that mean the same thing. Just like the recording secretary is an assistant to the chair. The recording secretary is not running the meeting. They're just keeping records. And they are keeping records as directed by the chair. If the chair turns to the recording secretary, can you tell me what we're doing? Well, the chair isn't acting like a traffic cop. Now let's just do this, from a colloquial mind image concept. If you were a traffic cop in the middle of the road, do you stop all traffic, all directions, and then ask a pedestrian that's walking by, do you remember the last direction I was directing traffic? Can you tell me what I should do next? Traffic cops don't do that. They have a whistle. They have usually colored gloves, and they're directing people to go in different directions at different times. They use the stop symbol, and then they use the you can go symbol. That's what a traffic cop does. They don't call on someone to help them in their role. They're the one in charge. They're the ones that direct traffic. Now, the first rule of the presiding officer is the chair, potentially, can get away with anything because they're the chair. But they do this at the leisure of the assembly. If they do things in such a way that are high-handed and violate process, then the assembly has rights, and they can do things like challenge a decision of the chair. And if that motion is seconded and it's accepted, then what can happen is is that the decision of the chair upon a favorable vote of the assembly can be overturned. And the chair doesn't want to do that because the chair, in essence, in the end, is operating with the respect of what we call the floor. So they want to do things in such a way that they are clearly even-handed, fair, allow people to have their word to say it. And so judgment is involved, just like any traffic cop. Sometimes they'll let traffic go in one way a little longer than you would think because they don't see many cars being waiting in service the other direction. And they see a lot of cars in a specific direction. That's using judgment. And when everyone can recognize that the judgment that's being used is good, invariably the assembly will potentially put up with a lot of stuff. So one of the roles of the presiding officer is to maintain the respect of the floor. A motion to appeal, a challenge to the chair, is actually a significant embarrassment to be avoided by the chair wherever possible. And good meetings, invariably, one of the measures you can give to a meeting that's been well run is that the meeting has gone by without anyone challenging a decision of the chair. The chair must be seen to be fair and impartial. I cannot stress that they're the traffic cop. They instruct the recording secretary things that have happened. Recently, and I'll just share with you a story, I received a phone call from a condominium in Saskatoon from a board member who is aware that I understand parliamentary process. And unfortunately, the previous meeting, which was a meeting of the owners, was all about whether or not the swimming pool should be closed because of COVID, or only certain people are allowed to use a swimming pool. And astonishingly enough, there was a meeting of the owners held in which two motions that proposed both alternatives, both were accepted by the chair and were voted upon, and there was majority vote in both cases, which is crazy. You have two issues that the chair permitted on the floor that contradict each other, causing enormous confusion in the minds of everybody. And to make things a little bit worse, the minutes came out, prepared by the secretary, that supports only one of the two positions. But in this meeting, the chair did not give any instructions to the recording secretary as to what was to go into the record. So the secretary, who actually voted for one of the particular issues, phrased the minutes in a way that they thought their perception of the meeting took place, because they didn't receive any instructions. And so, of course, at the next meeting and of course, there's now an emergency second meeting of the owners that have been called. There's been a petition virtually unanimous by all the owners because everyone's so confused about what's going on. One of the first things that's on the notice for the new meeting is to accept or amend the minutes of the meeting, which are just a mess because the chair did not give any instructions to the recording secretary. So these things seem elemental, but it's astonishing how sometimes things get off the rails. So in parliamentary process, votes of voting members are counted equally. Absent members have rights. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, one of the things as a chairperson, a presiding officer, that you're very, very wary of is new business. And I coach people who are in the role of presiding officer. If I'm called on to be a parliamentarian, I like to sit down with the chair prior to the meeting, and we go through a little bit of debriefing. And I really spend a little bit of time talking about new issues that come onto the floor from the floor. And my advice to the chair is, a new issue was not in the notice of the meeting. Therefore, people have made a decision not to attend. They've abstained based on what they thought was happening at the meeting. A new, fresh issue from the floor may be very important, it may be very meaningful, but it's in essence violating the rights of those who chose not to come to the meeting because they did not know that issue was going to come up. So if that happens to you as a presiding officer, I always suggest to the presiding officer that you let the person bring up the issue. You let them talk about the issue, get them every opportunity to have a free and open disclosure about why they feel about the way they feel. And then you say, thank you for this matter. We will now place it on as a notice of motion to be on the agenda for the next meeting so that all members can be aware of the importance of this issue and can come to the next meeting prepared to voice their views one way or the other. Because that way, the rights of those who aren't present are taken care of. And this is dealt with much better in Kerr and King parliamentary process than it is in Robert's Rules, but the principle is still clear. Under Robert's Rules of Order, the members who are absent absolutely have rights. And so in that vein, in that view, we should be very wary of new business that's been brought up from the floor. One of the most important things that happens in a meeting is at the beginning of the meeting when you adopt the agenda. And I always counsel people who are the presiding officers, you can change the order of events, but you can't necessarily add a new issue onto the agenda. And if you do, then that's under new business, and under new business, we're not able to vote on it today. We're going to accept it as a notice of motion, and it'll be on the next meeting's agenda. So everyone can be advised of the issue and can speak to it. All members have the right to have a fair and free debate. One of the key jobs of the chair is to make sure that all members understand the meaning and the significance of a proposed motion. Now, what I do is I adopt a bit of a style such as you may witness for an auctioneer. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a motion. Motion's on the floor. The motion has been made to increase dues by 10%. The motion has been seconded. There's been a discussion for the motion. Is there any discussion against the motion? Being a traffic cop. Hearing no discussion, we're going to now proceed to the vote. The motion is that we're going to increase dues by 10%. Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, Mr. Treasurer, can you tell the audience what the average new condominium fee is going to be? He reports. Thank you very much. So when we vote for this, whatever you're paying will now go from what you're paying to the new price, which you just heard. Are there any questions? Hearing none, I think we're ready for the vote. Are we ready for the vote? So each step of the way, the presiding officer is making everyone crystal clear in their understanding of what's going on. If you hear a question from the floor, someone's rising on a point of order, Mr. Chairman, what are we talking about? Then there's a real problem here. People are not understanding what's being talked about. And this happens when you add amendments on top of things. And as the traffic cop, if I witness someone adding a third layer of amendments onto a main motion, one of the tactics I try and employ is, hold the phone, everybody. I go to the person who made the motion. If we withdrew the motion and changed the motion to include all this stuff, would you agree to that? And if the person who made the motion says yes, I go, great. And then I turn to their seconder. Do you agree with taking this, to withdrawing the motion and replacing it? If I get their consent, then I go to the first person who made an amendment. Do you consent? Then I go to their seconder. Do you consent? Then I go to the third person who made the amendment. Do you consent? Then I go to the third amendment seconder. Do you consent? So everyone consents. I now declare that the motion is totally withdrawn. I'm now calling upon the person who made the first motion. Can you give us a fresh new motion with all the words included? And so then that person makes that motion, and then it's crystal clear what we're talking about. So All members have the right to know the meaning of the possible significance of a proposed motion. And sometimes that means the chair, the traffic cop, needs to intervene to make it really crystal clear to everyone. The majority has the right to make a decision. Sooner or later, we have to decide. The minority of people who have a minority view have the right to be protected, have the right to be free to speak, so their side of the issue can be heard. And that is the role of the chair, to make sure their rights are protected. Now, later on in this presentation, I have a little video clip. It was very, very, very interesting to me, because an individual who had the floor was being yelled out by others, and the chair had to intervene. So we'll look at that with great interest. So there's always a shared duty between the meeting leader and the assembly, that everyone understands parliamentary process. If we don't have that dynamic in place, I strongly suggest that the organization pay for the services of a parliamentarian to be there as an assistant to the chair and to the assembly to provide advice when called upon to do so. To me, that's the role of the parliamentarian. So when we start a meeting, what is things that the chair is going to be doing? First, they're going to call to the meeting to order. That's what the gavel's for. I call this meeting to order. All eyes are at the chair. If there's still people talking, silence. To have everyone's attention. Once all eyes are on the traffic cop, it's equivalent to blowing a whistle, then we have to proceed to certain aspects. Sometimes there's what's called a credentials desk, a group of people that are keeping track of who's coming to the meeting and who's authorized to be at the meeting, who's authorized to vote at the meeting. And invariably, the chair may, by having a credentials desk set up, call upon for a report, in which someone will report, we have 100 members, there are 60 present in the room. This meets the definition of quorum, in which case the chair could ask for a motion to establish chair, but usually the chair makes a declaration. Ladies and gentlemen, I've heard the report of the credentials desk. I now declare we've established quorum. What is quorum? Quorum means we have enough people under our bylaws to legally constitute business. Now, what do we do if we don't have quorum? Do we close the meeting? The answer is we absolutely do not. Do we proceed with the meeting? We absolutely do. Can we transact business in the meeting? Subject to ratification, we can. And so if someone wants to bring forward a matter, we want to debate it, we want to have a vote, that's all well and fine. It'll be entered in the record. But the record clearly establishes that everything that's being done is subject to ratification at a meeting of the members at a time in which quorum is legally established. So it doesn't stop you from running things. It just means what you do cannot be legally enforced until such time as that's ratified by the organization when there's a meeting where there's established quorum under the bylaws of the organization. The key power of the chair is to recognize individuals. Now, in the absence of standing rules, once the chair recognizes an individual, they can speak as long as they want. Now, if the chair says, I'm now going to recognize you, you have the ability to speak for 5 minutes. What have I just done? In the absence of standing rules, in the absence of the bylaws saying anything about this, I've just rendered a decision. Now, if no one says anything, I can get away with what I've done. So it's that balance again between the leader and the assembly. But the key power of the chair is to recognize individuals that have then the right to speak and to raise matters before the group. Does the chair have the right to refuse to recognize someone? Well, yes, but we have to go to our chart of accounts because we may be violating members' rights. And members may interrupt the chair if they feel that there's a question of privilege, because their rights as a member are violated. We talked about that in the previous session. So we want to enforce rules that are related to debate if they've been developed by the organization. Some organizations will, over time, pass resolutions that in the future, whenever we have a motion, that debate is limited to 10 minutes. That's not an unreasonable thing. If it's a lengthy motion, you got to write everything down in advance. When you make the motion, you have to be having an assistant passing it to the recording secretary or to the chair. The presiding officer wants to expedite business, recognize someone they've spoken for the motion, recognize someone they spoke against it, and the same hand to go up, and I'm hearing exactly the same argument. And then what I do in the role of the chair, thank you for repeating your previously mentioned marks, which is a little warning from me to that person. Okay, and then the person that's opposite wants to be recognized again. I'll allow them to speak. But if I hear exactly the same issues, and now it's clearly just no one's listening to each other, it's just repeating the same things over and over, then the next time the positive person is asking to be recognized, I'll say, you're asking me to recognize you to speak in favor of the motion. Do you have anything new to share with us? Because previously you've spoken to the same points repeatedly. We don't need to hear any repetition. Do you have anything new? And if they do, fair enough, go ahead. And I'll do the same to the alternative. But as a chair, I will not allow things just to go in circles. It has to be something new. Otherwise, I'm gonna, if I recognize them and they repeat the same issues over and over again, thank you for repeating the same information over and over again. I didn't hear anything new, but thank you for that. And then the next person does that. And then instantly the other hand goes up. I don't even recognize them. I think we've heard all debate on this matter, and I'm ignoring them now because they're not offering anything new. I asked them for something new and they didn't give me anything new. So I'm not going to recognize them. And because I want to expedite the meeting in an orderly fashion. There are times I have to make a decision and maybe people don't agree with my decision. But if I make a decision, I like to offer a comprehensive explanation before I make my decision. It's not arbitrary. And here's the reasons I'm making the ruling I'm doing. And I find that it helps a lot to maintain the respect of the floor. And then, of course, as the chair, when the meeting comes over, I declare. And when the vote is done, the chair will declare the winning result. The chair will instruct the recording secretary what goes into the record. So the gavel, it's a tool. It's a tool to gain attention. It's a visual tool. It's an auditory tool to bring all eyes onto the traffic cop. When we do a motion, we do it in a set process. We have what is called a main motion, and recognition is given by the chair to the person. They rise, they speak to the motion. If there isn't any standing rules, if there isn't any rules in the bylaw, the person is free to give a preamble, to introduce their main motion. And now some people will say that Robert's rules have rules against that. Well, okay, but again, it's a decision of the chair. If I allow someone to do a preamble, what am I really doing? I'm allowing it because then there won't be as much repetition when debate starts. The person's going to speak for their motion anyways. You might as well let them speak for it. But I hear it loud. Some people have noted that there's versions of Robert's rules that say you just do a main motion, you can't do a preamble. But what's the difference between preamble and speaking for the motion? That's where I'm coming from. It's a decision of the chair. So we need a seconder. At least one other person has to talk about the issue in the room. I really don't have a lot of tolerance for people who just say, "Oh, I second it so we can talk about it." As a chair, I'll even pointedly look at them. You second the motion so that we can talk about it. Thanks for wasting our time, because no one else in the room seems to want to talk about this issue, but clearly you want to waste our time. So I'll now permit the motion. But I'm sending a message to the seconder. Why are you wasting valuable time in this meeting? So once it's accepted, then of course you open the floor for debate. Obviously, you'll start with the person who made the motion to speak before it. Then I'll call for, as the traffic cop, is there anyone who wants to speak against it? I'm trying to get an alternate, balanced discussion back and forth. If there's no one speaking against the motion, then invariably we're ready to prepare a vote. And so I'll test, are we ready to vote? And what I do, and what I suggest to Chairman, is that you use the three repeat rule. Ladies and gentlemen, we've heard discussion. Are we ready for a vote? Are we ready to vote? Are we ready to vote? Is there any more discussion? Any more discussion? Any more discussion? I think we're ready to vote. Are we ready to vote? Well, let's vote. And then when I call for the voting, if it's a vote by hands, I have people vote for the issue with one hand and people vote against the issue with the other hand. That way there's no confusion in the counting of votes. Some people, you can't have two hands up, so that becomes funny. You got two hands up, buddy. And so that becomes funny. And then the chair declares the result. I declare the motion has passed. Then I turn to the recording secretary. Madam Secretary, Mr. Secretary, please record in the minutes this wording of the motion. It has been passed unanimously. Now, some people like to record the name of the person who made the motion, the seconder. If I look at corporate minute books, they don't do that. It's just a matter of, was there quorum? What was the business passed? Did it pass or did it fail? Those are the issues that in its simplest terms can be recorded in the formal record.
5.
Thank you very much. So really, we work with a tree of issues, and I know my time is short. Great things that we can do is receive a report rather than debate it. It's just got something that's going into the record. Establishing standing rules as the chair for future meetings is always a good idea. Should there be minutes? Of course there should be, but they should only reflect the business that's being transacted. Good meetings are 3/4 preparation, 1/4 theater. I believe in that. The parliamentarian is a resource available to the chair. If the chair is not feeling comfortable about what they're doing, then they should call upon that resource to help them. We want to establish a good environment in the meeting, start on time, bring everyone up to date. You can open with an attention getter, introduce a situation or problem, and then call for discussion on the matter. Good to have agendas. The agendas are a plan. You can have timings that are assigned to them. But the normal flow of an agenda is call to order, the formal adoption of the agenda. That's a very key part of the meeting. Call upon reports, oral reports, then bring back business that was previously discussed that now comes forward and where there's a notice of motion. Then we can proceed to introduce discussion of new items, but not necessarily vote upon them today. But we can convert them into a notice of motion for the next meeting, and then plan for our next meeting when the timings for that meeting will be set. Timed agendas are very, very useful, can assist the chair to stay on track, allow plenty of a time for discussion, promote the concept of a notion of motion, and tools that are available when an issue is complex is referred to committee. And the chair cannot directly speak for and against an issue, but there's nothing wrong with the presiding officer to lobby. Ladies and gentlemen, this seems to be an issue with a lot of discussion and a lack of information. I think I would like to suggest, and I would like to call upon, is there anyone that's interested in seeing and making a motion to refer this to committee where we can really study this issue in greater detail? Is there anyone who wants to make a motion to refer to committee? Anyone? Oh, you are. Thank you so much. And so, and then the traffic cop can call for a seconder and deal with the issue in that way. Motion to postpone serves the same purpose. And of course, a motion to adjourn kills the meeting right now. Nothing can happen because the meeting is closed. These are tools that are available to us. Of course, people sometimes, if they're on the floor, will call the question. And again, this is a bit of a signal that the presiding officer is allowed debate to go on too long. If someone is proposing, call the pending question, let's vote now, then, it's a nudge. It's not an insult, but it's a nudge to the chair. Can we get on with this, please? And I know that when I'm in the assembly, I'm Mr. Call the Question, just for that reason alone. Now, here's a little videotape. I wanted to finish off today's session, and I thought it was very, very instructive. So I'm going to start it right now. Oh,
you're at 1 minute left, so
okay, thank you.
Time.
I'm going to make sure I share sound.
Respected Prime Minister. Prime Minister!
I say to the right honourable gentleman, I think that the points that he made are the same points he's been making in response to my statements, regardless of the content of my statements for some time now. He talked about the economic analysis. We did publish an economic analysis of the proposals that the government had put forward.
And someone's interrupting the person who has the floor.
Order.
I love this fellow.
Scope for disagreement about what is true and what isn't true.
His name is John Bercow.
In fairness, I repeat the point that the person who has the floor must be heard. The Prime Minister.
He's an excellent traffic.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I say to the right honourable gentleman that I think in his intervention from a sedentary position, he may have inadvertently misled the House on this matter. No.
Of course, the member of the floor is looking to the chair to bring some decorum into the House.
What was that? Order. I didn't hear what was said. I hope the word liar wasn't used, but order. I'm perfectly capable of handling this matter with alacrity, and I shall do so. If that word was used without equivocation or qualification, that word must be withdrawn at once. At once. Order.
We have a traffic cop in charge.
If a member on the front bench used that word, I'm sorry, I'm not debating it, I'm not arguing, I'm not negotiating. That word must be withdrawn at once. Who was the person that used the word?
Of course, this must be a standing rule within their organization.
I'm advised. I admit I didn't see which member used it. I'm advised, I think on good authority, that word was used by the leader of the Scottish National Party. If so, I want the debate to continue, and it will, but if so, I simply ask the right honourable gentleman to withdraw that word. He cannot accuse another member in this House of dishonesty. Withdraw.
In courtesy to yourself, I withdraw. For courtesy to yourself.
No, there are plenty of precedents for that. I remember doing it once myself.
But we have a real traffic cop in charge here.
A member of the Shadow Cabinet from West Bromwich once doing it out of deference to the chair rather than the person who he'd been attacking. That's enough. That's enough.
The Prime Minister. He's not using a gavel.
Mr. Speaker, if I could continue my explanation to the right honourable gentleman. As I said, the government put forward an economic analysis of the deal that the government had put forward. We did that in the economic analysis that was published earlier before the withdrawal agreement was put towards the House. What we also did in that was to recognise that the political declaration had areas within it which had not yet been confirmed, and there were variations in relation to the degree of friction across the border that would come from that.
Look at
and we published we could have taken a very low variation, which would be very close to the government's deal on the economic analysis. We could have taken a high. We took a midpoint. I think that was entirely fair for the government to do. What the economic analysis of the deal that the government had put forward showed was that if you were going to honour the referendum, the deal that actually delivered best for the British economy was the deal that the government had put forward. Now, the Right Honourable Gentleman also talks about putting an end to the current situation. Well, as I've indicated, we can indeed move forward when we agree a deal across this House. And if the Right Honourable Gentleman is so concerned about avoiding no deal, I assume that when a deal is brought back from the European Union this next time, then he and his members of the SNP in this House will be voting for a deal in order to support the future of the United Kingdom. And then finally, once again, the Right Honourable Gentleman talks about the economic impact on Scotland of leaving the European Union, and talks virtually in the same breath about his view that Scotland should be independent from the United Kingdom. And it may raise cheers on the SNP benches,
there has
but it wouldn't
been now
raise cheers from
decorum
those
brought
people
in
in
where
Scotland whose
voices
economic
can be
future
heard and there
depends
can
on being
be
a member of
an
the
active
UK.
debate.
Order. Of course there is enormous interest, which, as per usual, I want to accommodate. Can I just appeal, please, to colleagues at this time, with the country watching us, let's have a robust but respectful debate. It is perfectly possible for colleagues to make their points with considerable force, but to do so with courtesy. And I know we'll be led in this matter by a former party leader and a notably courteous Right Honourable Gentleman.
So I really want to just finish off talking about chairmanship skills. This was just an outstanding example of how an individual who's the presiding officer is keeping control, like a traffic cop, of how the meeting is being run. He's allowing everyone to be heard. He is not letting things get out of control. He's using persuasion. He didn't use a lot of tactical tools. They're there when he needs them, but he's in his case, instead of using a gavel, he's using his own made-up approach, order, which draws all attention to himself. It's unique to him, but he has found a tool to get attention to him as the presiding officer because he is the traffic cop.